to the Thursday, February 27th, 2020 version of the Clemson Dubcast. Football team back at it as of yesterday, late afternoon and evening. Plenty of insight and takeaways from Paul Strelo and yours truly. I got to say, the pictures, they say, I guess, pictures worth 1,000 words. The picture that Paul took of Brian Brzee and Miles Murphy standing next to Xavier Thomas, that said a lot. They made Xavier Thomas, who's not small, look like Amari Rodgers, basically. So, continuing coverage and analysis of the yet another infusion of high-level talent in the freshman class, and plenty more stuff coming at TigerIllustrated.com. Title sponsor of the podcast since the very day we began, Parham Smith and Archingham Law Firm in downtown Greenville. I've known Blake Smith for a long time. I guess about 10 or 12 years ago, he helped me with a situation involving some possible medical malpractice, gave me some great advice, and it wasn't just preferential treatment. That's how he and his staff, which includes Brooke Archinhold, handle every case. They are founded on a dedication to helping injured individuals throughout South Carolina. Free consultations. Phone number 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com, P-A-R-H-A-M law.com. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith and Archinhold. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. Okay, two guests today. Joey Knight of the Tampa Bay Times, who has, in very short order, developed a really good relationship with Jeff Scott. No surprise there. Jeff has done a great job of sort of saturating that community with all things South Florida Bulls. And then going to chat with our good friend Chris Lowe of ESPN.com about some of the latest developments with Georgia declaring what has been declared an act of war against Alabama. What does that mean? Also, his thoughts on some Clemson-related stuff and plenty more. Here we go. Okay, joined by Joey Knight of the Tampa Bay Times, South Florida beat writer. Thank you for joining us, first of all, Joey.
My pleasure. Good to talk to you, Larry.
Yeah. You just got out of an interview meeting with Charlie Weiss Jr., the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for the Bulls. And I'm just curious, what is it like you're a veteran of this profession, as you have to start from total scratch in developing relationships with not only a head coach, but the people in his football office?
Well, the only frustrating thing about it is once you've developed or what you feel is a pretty strong relationship with the preceding staff, they're all gone. So you got to start the process off from scratch. The process itself in this case has been very pleasant. You know, I got to level with you. When I sat down for lunch recently with Jeff Scott, it's like I had known him 20 years. Now, we had some similar experiences in our background. My first job in sports reporting, I covered an area where his dad was from. That's where his dad grew up, and I actually covered a coach that his dad played for, so we had some common ground there. But, even that said, it was like, he was just so easy to talk to. It was like I had known the guy for 20 years. And, talking to Weiss Jr., the offensive coordinator, just over the phone earlier today, great conversation, just very easy to speak with. And, we had about a 10, 12-minute conversation about I was asking him about his past as kind of a grunt for Nick Saban as an analyst at Alabama, and he was very forthcoming with everything he had to do in that job. So, it's been very easy this time around establishing these relationships early on with the Jeff Scott staff. And, just selfishly as a reporter, I hope they stick around a while so I can continue to forge and build these relationships, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So what's the other extreme? Not necessarily asking you to name names, but just want you to describe what it's like when you have a coach who's not very approachable, doesn't really see the merit of providing access to those grubby media people who are trying to find out information about their program.
I've seen that at other places I've been where you got kind of the bunker mentality, Larry, and it's just this the raging paranoia, not really wanting to be forthcoming with any kind of information for just fear of giving the opponent some kind of illusionary unfair advantage. And you've seen that, I'm sure, probably at some other places. But I haven't really gotten that at the University of South Florida, and I'll tell you why. It's a group of 5 school that really needs to promote itself, that needs to go out in the community and drum up interest. And the way you do that is have your coaches be outgoing and engaging and accessible. Willie Taggart was like that. He was very accessible. We had a great relationship, still do. Charlie Strong, had his guard up a little bit more. He came from Texas. He came, before that, Louisville and the University of Florida. So he had his guard up a little bit. Wasn't quite as accessible, but still we spoke many times just off the record and phone calls. So we had a good relationship. I was building a good relationship with Kerwin Bell, his offensive coordinator. I had some really good relationships with some of Charlie's assistants. And now, Jeff Scott has gotten the memo. He is in a major league market where the University of Florida is kind of competing for eyes and viewers and fans in the seats, with the Buccaneers, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, with the Tampa Bay Rays. It's kind of a different dynamic. It's a totally different dynamic than Clemson, where that's the only gig in town. So he understands he has to go out and market and promote his product. And part of that is being accessible to the media and engaging. And he has done that so far. I have no complaints so far.
Can you give a lay of the land, just an idea of what Jeff inherited as far as the infrastructure with facilities, talent, and then with Charlie Strong? I don't want to speak out of turn, but sort of maybe the perception was that he wasn't as sort of, I guess, all in and passionate about getting out there and promoting the program as maybe you need to be, and as Jeff is. How tough of a job is that Jeff takes over?
Well, you're right. Charlie Strong just did not feel that was part of his job responsibility and did not do that, did not go out and drum up donor support and engage the community. Jeff Scott, like I said, got that memo. I'm sure when Michael Kelly, the athletic director, and Steve Carell, the new president, went and visited Jeff up in Clemson at his home, I'm sure that was one of the big talking points. Like, hey, we love everything you're about, Jeff. We love the program you come from and your abilities as an offensive mind. But we've got facilities to build. We've got some infrastructure to build. Right now, there really is no infrastructure to speak of. They have 2 or 3 nice practice fields on their campus. They have a weight room. It's fairly sprawling, but it's something that they have to share with some other sports programs. They have no indoor facility. And when you're talking Tampa, Florida, in July and August, it is going to rain every afternoon. So I remember the very first preseason practice last year, cut short because of rain. Very frustrating. So they are about halfway financially toward their goal of a $40 million football center, which would include the indoor facility, a football exclusive complex, which would include their own weight room, coaches' offices, locker room, meeting rooms, a player's lounge, all the bells and whistles, a training room. Last I checked, they're a little over $20 million toward that goal. And they want to start building this year. I don't know. I can't get a word of how close they want to be to that $40 million before they start breaking ground. But I know there's a desire to do it in 2020. So that's what Jeff Scott's been all about. Obviously, recruiting. He had to hit the ground running recruiting and hiring a staff. But he's also been about going out and trying to drum up donors, engage this community, get his face out there, which simply his predecessor did not do.
And then the salary pool for his staff, correct me if I'm wrong, they upped it to somewhere around $3.5 million. Is that right?
I don't have the contract right in front of me, Larry, but that sounds right. I do know it was a significant uptick from Charlie's staff. I do remember that. So yeah, Jeff got that going, and he brought in a really, what I consider to be a really solid staff. When you think of Glenn Spencer, the defensive coordinator, came from FAU, but he's been all over the place. He's a Georgia Tech alumnus. Weiss Jr., he's kind of the, for lack of a better term, he's kind of that whiz kid, that child prodigy that everybody's high on. I mean, he worked for 2 years for Nick Saban in Alabama, so I don't think Nick's keeping a young kid around if he doesn't think he's worth his salt. Daquan Bowers, defensive line coach, played for the Buccaneers here, so he's got that connection with the community. Joey King, Trevor Lawrence's high school coach from Georgia, had immense success at the Georgia high school level. He's the tight ends coach. Just a really solid staff that Jeff put together on the fly upon his hiring in early December. And yes, he got a significant upgrade in terms of the assistant salary pool. So I think a lot of people, that I've spoken to are as high on this group, and, those guys' resumes speak for themselves.
You mentioned sort of the fragmented nature of sports interests down there in a big city, in a major area. You mentioned, in addition, that, you have Florida competing for eyeballs and all that. I'm wondering, what about Central Florida, on that same sort of, I guess, playing field? I think their salary pool is about the same, and they've had quite a bit of success. And I think Randy Shannon just got a raise, like a $600,000 raise to $1 million a year. How much of a factor are they in terms of the competition with South Florida?
Oh, I think it's a huge factor. That's USF's top rival, top geographic rival, and they've got it going on over there, Larry. What they've done on the field the last 3 years, speaks for itself. They've got some facilities up and running. They're doing great with, just donors. If memory serves, they are close to starting construction of a lazy river type thing, around their athletic facilities that can be used on game days, and obviously would be a great recruiting tool. They already have their indoor practice facility. They've had one for years. They've got their on-campus stadium, and, the on-campus stadium, Larry, is just something totally separate from what USF wants right now. The on-campus stadium will take care of itself, they're thinking, in time. What they need right now is just a football facility, a football complex that kids, when they recruit them, can come see, hey, this is on our campus. Here's your locker room. Here's your lounge. Here's our coaches' meetings. Here's our training room, all under one roof. Let's walk over here. Here's the indoor practice facility. That's the infrastructure they need right now. And, the hope is once you get that up and running, that improves recruiting, that improves your performance on the field, that gets your attendance numbers up, your donation dollars up, and the on-campus stadium takes care of itself. But yes, they look closely at what UCF is doing, because UCF has whipped them on the field the last few years, and right now it has the upper hand in terms of facilities. There's no question about it. There's no debate. And, that's something that USF is keeping an eye on, and that's why this push, just to get this infrastructure going is so crucial for this program at this point in time. They're in the same conference as UCF. They're vying for the same players in a lot of cases as UCF. So it's critical. There is a sense of urgency as far as that goes.
Okay, so take me back. Charlie Strong's out, and you are getting started on a coaching search, which a lot of people might think is exciting, but it's actually a total nightmare for most reporters. When did Jeff's name first sort of pop on your radar that you recall?
You know what? It's like you and all of us. The second Charlie Strong gets fired, our bosses want, hey, give us a list of people that you give us a list of 10 top candidates. So he was on that list initially, just because of his father's background at Florida State, being Bobby Bowden's offensive coordinator. We also kind of dropped his name for the FSU job when that came up shortly before. Jeff Scott's, close to 40 years old. He's proven his chops at Clemson. So, and just based on him being a Florida guy and his dad's association with FSU, we thought he would be good for that job. But he was one of the first names that we thought of and that we kind of dropped. As a matter of fact, I do recall going on the radio the day after Charlie was fired, that Monday. And, the radio guys here in Tampa asked me, and I said, well, if I was a betting man and you needed an answer right now, I would say Jeff Scott's the guy. So I kind of, in hindsight, looked great in that regard. But he was, just because Michael Kelly, the athletic director, has an ACC background. And so, I knew that he knew who Jeff Scott was and what Jeff Scott was all about. So it just made a lot of sense. And I got to tell you, I think Larry Scott was his first and only draft choice. I don't know that Michael would say that. I don't know if he would ever tell me, we also made a call to this guy and we put out feelers for this one. But I believe that Jeff Scott was atop his list from day one.
It was really interesting. In December, I got to talk with Michael Kelly at length about the play-by-play of his pursuit of Jeff, and we're talking like hour by hour, day by day, and it was really fascinating. And the thing I appreciated most, or that impressed me the most about Michael, was that where a lot of ADs in this sort of cutthroat world of finding coaches would go right to the guy to pursue him, Michael called Dabo, or I think actually he called Woody McCorvey, who's sort of Dabo's right-hand man, because they're in the middle of they're getting started on practice for the ACC championship. Right. And basically followed that sort of protocol of deferring to the head coach on when to start talking to the candidate. And so I don't know if you had sort of had similar conversations with Michael or Jeff about that, but Jeff was telling me that it was kind of nerve-wracking for him because naturally he's worried, oh crap, what a lot can happen over a 3-day period when I'm not talking to South Florida and maybe they could find somebody. So that was kind of a very interesting sort of wrinkle to Kelly's recollections of it.
Yeah, that tells you about who Michael Kelly is. He is that's why he's kind of universally respected in his profession. You talk about following protocol. He's going to do it the right way. And, you've got I didn't quite get the hour by hour breakdown, but I've been able to fragment a lot of pieces together about how the process went. And, that's just who Michael Kelly is. He's going to do things the right way. And, Jeff, just the thing that sticks out from that time frame is Jeff saying, hey, when he got that call from Dabo, it was like, hey, what you doing, boy? He said, well, I just got home, coach, and getting ready to take a shower, spend a little bit of family time, and he goes, well, I just got a call from Michael Kelly at South Florida, and let me tell you, this is a job you want. And, the rest is history. So I don't think, if he had known how it had played out, I don't think Jeff Scott had reason to be nervous at all. I can understand why he was, because I really do believe that he was the first overall number 1 draft pick for the University of South Florida.
Okay, so your first introduction to Jeff, I presume, was at his introductory press conference? Yes,
and they had like the little media scrum after he talked to the boosters and talked on the podium. We had a little media scrum. And then later in the Selman Center, which is kind of the athletic center, that's where I go to do my work. I was sitting there typing up the day's stuff. And he walked in with a few other people, and I got to meet him face to face and shake his hand. And then 2 or 3 weeks after that, when he got back and after Clemson did its thing and played in the national title game, we had lunch, and he let me sit in on his first team meeting, and I really appreciated that. Gave me some insight I've never had before. So, yeah, I really got to know him after that first team meeting and that whole day there.
All right, so the 3 weeks, I guess, well, maybe it was longer than that, 3 weeks to a month, I guess, when he was not there, he was up here. Was there any apprehension at all from the folks down there about, hey, we got our head coach, but he's going to be gone for a while?
You know what? I didn't sense a lot of that, Larry. Maybe it's because while he was up there, he was hiring some pretty good coaches.
Yeah.
He was bringing in Glenn Spencer and Weiss Jr. and Pat White. And so people saw that and they said, oh, this he's pulling double duty. He's got it going on. And I know there were a lot of days there where Jeff Scott probably didn't sleep because he was working on Clemson during the day and USF at night. And, you would see, him get a commitment from a kid, a receiver in South Carolina whose name now, of course, escapes me, that he from the Columbia area, suddenly you start to read about him being on the radar for USF, and he did end up signing with USF. So fans got those little tidbits of information. Oh, here's a coach. Here's a player that's going to visit, USF. Here's Cade Fortin, the former quarterback at North Carolina. He's coming in for a visit. There's a chance he could transfer. So people could tell that Jeff Scott was logging double duty and just working his butt off while trying to prepare Clemson for the national title game. So if there had been no news for like a week or 10 days, I think people would have probably been nervous, but it was obvious he was working all that time.
So the lunch date, was that your idea, his, and how did that come about?
That was his idea.
Oh, okay,
that was
wow.
his idea. Like everybody else, I inquired, hey, when can I get a sit down with Coach Scott? And they came to me and said he would like you to, sit in on the team meeting and have lunch afterward. And I said, I can't thank you enough. That would be wonderful. And like I said, he gave me some insight that I had never experienced before. I don't know. I don't think it necessarily had to do with anything with my reporting or writing ability, but I think I am the longest tenured guy on the beat since Willie first got here in 2013. So that perhaps had something to do with it. But I mean, it was basically, aside from maybe a couple of little things, everything was open season for me. I sat in on the coaches meeting first, his kind of first coaches meeting where he was there in person. That was about an hour or so. And then the players meeting, which was about an hour or so. And, everything that he told those guys, obviously the real significant things that I thought would be really interesting to the readers, I reported. So again, that's what USF and Jeff Scott have to do, just to drum up interest in this program. You can't be like an Ohio State or a Texas or, an Alabama and just have a siege mentality and close off quarters. You can't do that at USF when you're trying as hard as you can to generate interest and get people to come to Raymond James Stadium and see you play. You got to be creative about how you're going to engage a fan base. And that kind of insight, that got a lot of reader feedback. That was interesting to a lot of people. And again, Jeff going out and showing his face. He had a little, before one of the basketball games recently, he had a little reception for all the football season ticket holders in the Yingling Center. Just punch and pretzels and chips and things like that. But, he made the gesture and he stood up and talked to him and told him how happy he was and how grateful he was. And, this was his goal for season ticket sales, a number he wanted to reach. And it was just another gesture, another instance to get his face out there and engage donors. So when you're at USF, you got to do creative things like that. And they've been doing it since he got here.
If you're in the Eastern Midlands and PD area and you're in any way interested in buying and selling a home, commercial property, land, need to consider reaching out to Uptown Realty. They're based out of Sumter and run by a friend of mine, Patrick Enzer, big Clemson guy, used to cover the Tigers in a newspaper capacity, longtime supporter of Tiger Illustrated, longtime listener to the Dubcast. The home buying process should be an enjoyable experience, so let Patrick and his staff do all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is pick up the phone and call 803-774-0435 or go to uptownrealtysc.com. Quite often during the week, early in the morning, I go work out in Lot 2 near the stadium, and the Abernathy Boutique Hotel, the parking lot is full. What a wonderful addition to the Clemson community. The Abernathy has become a very popular lodging spot for all the ESPN personnel who frequent this place on such a regular basis these days. Taps Bar and Cafe, a great place for some of you professors and university types to wind down after work during the week. They also have a new Dabo room that they have recently unveiled, so looking forward to seeing that. Learn more about all this at theabernathy.com. It's interesting, Clemson under Dabo, they don't have that siege mentality necessarily. I mean,
Right.
He's very forthcoming, but it's still a very controlled environment, controlling the message and all that. I mean, let's just put it this way. He's not inviting reporters to come sit in on his staff
Right.
meetings.
And he doesn't have to, because 80,000 people are still going to come to Death Valley every Saturday.
Exactly.
But and that's not to say that Jeff's going to open up practices to us. I haven't heard anything about practices being open to the public yet. I mean, that may be something where they draw the line and say, hey, we don't want to. I mean, this is a new staff. We're going to put in some new stuff that hopefully they've never seen. We're not going to give them access to that. And I completely understand that. But, just that gesture and, hey, this may be another thing that would interest people if we just opened up our team meeting, gave that kind of transparency, and may endear us to a few more potential season ticket holders. So there you go.
Can you give a sense of the media landscape and how many people cover South Florida regularly? Like, how many other people were sitting there maybe going, ooh, I would have loved to have gone to lunch with Jeff Scott or sat in on that meeting?
It's kind of funny in the past, and I told Jeff this, day one of preseason practice, you'll have 2 or 3 or 4, local TV outlets. You'll have your websites, your school paper, your fan websites. You'll have me, which we're the only newspaper in the market now. Maybe a newspaper from Lakeland or Sarasota or a fringe area. They'll all be out for day one, and then day 2, that number's probably cut by a third.
Mm.
So Jeff Scott knows what he has to do just to keep those people coming back to him, and that's win and have an exciting program. But that's kind of the lay of the land. Now, this is the past. On a typical game week, you may have, like I said, day one, it's everybody, all hands on deck. But then you get into the grind and the rigmarole of the season. You'll have us, the Tampa Bay Times, and you may have a couple of other TV stations. And again, the USF eccentric websites, the fan websites, and that's it. So, Jeff Scott's trick is just to get, all the media there all the time, which is, like I said, this is a very, very difficult thing to do in this market because this is not a traditional college town by any means. This is a major league NFL town.
Okay, what was the most interesting thing that you took from the lunch with Jeff?
Wow, the most interesting thing I took. You know what? It was before the lunch when he showed me his in his office. He showed me his Clemson all-in manual. That's what he called it, the all-in manual.
Yeah.
Like we're all in. And it was just a 3-ring behemoth that was like 8 or 10 inches in thickness. And, just to break it down, he told us, it just covered, he said it covered every aspect of the culture that we had, under Dabo. Like it included rules, philosophy, strength and conditioning, what was expected of the, what was expected when a recruit comes on campus, from everyone from the coaches to the players to the secretaries, just everything about the day-to-day nuts and bolts of Clemson football and its culture. And it was not a playbook. He made that clear. He said, you will not find any X's and O's in that. It's just, this is what we do on a daily basis at Clemson. And I just thought that was kind of fascinating that, just to go through that, just to go to that trouble and that kind of meticulousness to put something tangible together every year, because Jeff said it's different every year. Dabo does a new one every year. It's not something that collects dust. It's something that they spruce up and freshen up and retweak and refine every year. And it's just so darn thick. I thought that was very impressive and kind of incredible. And I'm sure he'll have the same kind of manual for his staff at USF. But that was kind of the most fascinating thing, I think.
And then the meeting you sat in on, you said you learned a lot of interesting stuff that even readers took note of. What were some of those things? Just some of the sayings, some of the things that Jeff told his guys that really stuck out in my mind. I remember him saying, you are going to work harder than you have ever worked in your life. I promise you that. He said, but you're also going to have more fun. He really pressed it on about how, just from what he had gathered, it just seems like USF players weren't having fun anymore. They had come off a 4-8 season, and the year before that they were 7-6, but they lost their last 6. So this is a program, that has lost 14 of its last 18. So I think what his big deal is just to convey to them, hey, this is going to be the hardest you've worked in your life, but you're going to enjoy football again. He said, kind of rehashing an old Bo Schembechler quote, and I'm paraphrasing, but, those who stick around will be champions. He said, hey, I'm not going to begrudge you if you go into the transfer portal, but if you go into the portal, it's a one-way door. And he talked about how at Clemson, they were all about player development, recruiting and developing guys, and how Dabo did not tap into the portal much at all. So he kind of made that point clear. And then, he just went over, practice schedules and when they were thinking of starting up spring practice. He made a point to introduce every single assistant, and every assistant came up and spoke for about 2 or 3 minutes. And on a big screen behind him, he had a picture of the assistant and their family. I thought that was really cool. So it was really just an introductory thing. And just to hear some tidbits of his philosophy. Well, it was just, like I said, it was really interesting and insightful and something I've never really kind of been exposed to before. Now, do you have free reign of who you would like to talk to, like assistant coaches and things like that? Are there any ground rules, or do you have to work through the sports information communications person?
Well, out of a courtesy, I always work through sports information, but I've requested 2 or 3 assistants right now, and I've gotten them. So, so far, yeah, we've had access. I don't think this is going to be a thing where Jeff Scott's the only voice of the program. It hasn't been so far.
And you covered Florida, the Gators, when Spurrier was there, correct?
Yeah, the last bit of Spurrier, I was there from 97 to 03. So the last stages of Spurrier and the first 2 years of the Zucker. Yep.
Wow. Yeah, I remember I covered when I worked at a previous paper a long time back then, was with the Augusta Chronicle, and covered some Georgia, some South Carolina. And I've told people as I try to sort of describe what it's like to cover a national powerhouse like Clemson has become, that back then when you guys would stroll into the press box, I, and I'm sure others would look at you guys and say, wow, man, that must be so cool to cover that team and that coach, sort of a professional jealousy, because you want to be a part of it. You want to cover the big stories. What was that like for you, being around that at that time? Such a unique personality as head coach, and then such a force on the national college football scene.
It was never dull. I'll tell you that. You never knew what you were going to get from one day to the next. And That's what made it fun. I remember one year they just had a terrible defensive game. And I forget the opponent. It may have been Mississippi State. They went up there and lost. And during the coin toss, the captain, whoever it was, won the toss and elected to receive. Didn't elect to defer, elected to receive. So, elected to kick off. Didn't elect to defer, elected to kick off. So the Gators kicked off twice in the same game, start both halves. And they lost the game. And it was just a terrible performance. And I think it was that game where Spurrier was just so disgusted with the tackling that a couple days later, he had allowed all the media to come right out to the center of the practice field and watch them tackle. And all he said was, I'm going to show you that we practice tackling. Here it is. And he let us stand out there for about 10 minutes and just, watch them tackle. I know one FSU game, a player from FSU was accused of stomping Ernest Graham, the tailback, after a play, like stomping his leg. And nothing was called, and that infuriated Spurrier. It infuriated him even more when he saw it on film. And he brought his PowerPoint into the press conference one day and showed us that clip. And doggone, I forgot the guy's name. Played with the Arizona Cardinals ultimately. But after the play, after the whistle, you can see him stomp on Ernest Graham's leg. And I think Ernest Graham actually missed some time. And that started a whole firestorm because we all wrote it. We all wrote about Spurrier bringing his PowerPoint and showing us and how upset he was. So, it was never dull with him. And, it was fun. And the other thing I remember about that, there were, 6 or 8 newspapers that covered Florida daily. That was back when, like, if you lived in Tampa like me, if you worked for the Tampa Tribune, you lived in Gainesville.
Yep.
If you were from the Orlando Sentinel, but you covered, UF, you lived in Gainesville. So we had, writers from Orlando, Tampa, St. Pete, Palm Beach, Jacksonville. I mean, it was like 6 to 8 newspapers, but we all got along. We were all bloodthirsty competitors, but, on the road, we'd go out together, and a lot of those guys I still consider some of my best friends in the business. We all got along, and those were fun times, man. I'm glad you brought that up. That brought back some good memories. Those were fun times.
Well, good deal, Joey. Really appreciate you sharing some of your insight and some of the inner workings of how you're developing that relationship with Jeff Scott. I think y'all will continue to get along great. We had a great relationship when he was here, and definitely miss him. It's going to be weird going through the 2020 season without him around.
Absolutely. I heard just nothing but good things when he was at Clemson. A lot of people like yourself saying you're going to love this guy, and so far he hasn't disappointed. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to building this relationship, as I said at the outset.
Well, best of luck to you. Have a great day, man.
Thanks, Larry. You too.
Harris Flooring has been a major part of the facilities enhancements over at Clemson, not just with athletics, but also at the university level. And we are thrilled that they are a part of the Dubcast as a sponsor. Since 1947, the Junkins family and Harris Flooring have provided a unique shopping experience through value in their services, developing the right product solutions, and delivering on their promises. To check out some reviews on their work, just go to their Facebook page, Harris Flooring America. Rave reviews, just first class all the way. Phone number 864-642-6183. If you're a business owner and your business involves credit card processing, you need to reach out to Tandem Innovative Payment Solutions. A lot of different ways that Tandem can improve your bottom line by shaving off some of those expenses. In addition to processing credit card payments, Tandem also manages inventory, schedules staff, tracks sales, gains insight into customers, and gets transaction reports. With Tandem, you're not a number, you're a neighbor. Learn more about Tandem at tandempayment.com. Okay, joined by really good friend Chris Lowe from ESPN.com. Always a pleasure to have you, man, and hope you and your family are doing well.
We're doing great, Larry. It's always good to be with you.
So, big news this week in college football, and I've heard lots of different takes on it. The most, I guess, profound is that Georgia and Kirby Smart declare an act of war by going and nabbing Scott Cochran, not just the act of grabbing him, but doing it right smack dab in the middle of the all-important winter conditioning workouts that a strength coach like Cochran presides over. What's your sort of overall take on this development?
Yeah, I'm not stunned by it, Larry. I knew that Scott had been sort of itching to get out and do something else on the field, being on the field coach. And he wants to be a head coach. A lot of people that I know Lane Kiffin thinks he can be one, and I don't think he really saw that route staying a strength coach at Alabama. As valuable as he was to that program, and he was one of two remaining football staff members with Saban that came there in 2007. The other being trainer Jeff Allen. And listen, there's no doubt that those two, Jeff Allen and Scott Cochran, and the way they worked in concert with Nick Saban, and having that triumvirate in place for as long as they were, was a huge part of their success. Huge part in a lot of different areas. But I knew that Scott had sort of been willing to maybe broaden his horizons a little bit, so I wasn't stunned by it. And when you throw in the fact that he and Kirby are very close, had remained close going back to Kirby Smart's time there as defensive coordinator at Alabama, their wives are very close, good friends. This is something that Lane Kiffin had talked to Cochran about when Lane got the Ole Miss job. So I see it, and I think honestly, I don't think Nick Saban. Well, in fact, I know it wasn't. I talked to Nick. I don't think he was stunned by it. That he would go and take this shot and try to take on a different, as Nick called it, a different career path.
And they were Cochran and Kirby were also flirting heavily in 2016 when Kirby took the Georgia job,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure were. In fact, Kirby tried to hire him then as the dog strength coach.
Okay.
Not on the. This is a little bit different. This is an on the field special teams job. But back when Kirby took that job, he tried to hire him as his strength coach, head strength and conditioning coach. And Scott decided to stay, and I think Alabama ponied up in that role.
All right, so I'm wondering, and a lot of people, I guess, are wondering, if Cochran was so integral to that process and that machine that Saban built. I mean, you got 10 assistants, 10 on-field assistants. Why wouldn't Nick say, you know what, he's that much of an asset to us. I'm going to make him I'm going to elevate him to a, so-called maybe a special teams role, a lesser role on that sort of cadre of full-time assistants. Why wouldn't he do that?
Well, I don't think he felt like at this point that he knew for sure that Cochran was ready to be, on the field coach. He hasn't coached special teams. He hasn't coached running backs. He hasn't coached defensive backs. And it'd be a pretty good leap of faith. Now, not that Cochran still wouldn't be valuable in the way he connects and relates with the players, his energy. There are a lot of things. You know this, Larry. All good strength coaches, and I said this on Feinbaum the other day, and Scott, I felt like, was this at Alabama, are sort of the soul of the program because they're with the players really more than any other coach year-round. They're with them all the time. Players come to them. They confide in them. They're with them in the summer, the off-season program. They're in the weight room. You go around the country. It's like that at Ohio State. They're at Clemson. I remember Urban Meyer telling me one time, when you take over a program, first thing you better do is you better make sure you get a really good, strong, energetic strength coach whose energy is infectious. And certainly Cochran was that at Alabama. But I just don't think Nick felt like at this point that he was ready to go down that road with somebody who was unproven as a position coach. And the way he explained it to me was, in his mind, in Nick's mind, I think in Scott's mind, Scott was ready to do something else. He didn't want to be he was more concerned in being an on-the-field coach because he wants a shot someday as a head coach. And I just don't see much of a chance. The reality is, if you're a strength coach your entire career, going from that to being a head coach, even at a smaller division school, probably ain't going to happen. And I think that's sort of where Scott was in his career now. And if he's got that opportunity at Georgia and Kirby's willing to go down that road, which he was, and I think I quoted Nick saying this, it's probably best for Scott and best for us. And that way we get someone who's 100% vested in being our strength and conditioning coach.
So from Georgia's side, is this a positive mostly because it's a negative to Alabama? It takes something vital away from Alabama. Is Cochran's sort of value to Georgia, given that he's now a special teams coach and a significantly unproven commodity in that respect, is it mostly just one of those where you get stronger because of, by virtue of directly making one of your main rivals weaker?
Yeah, I think it's, without question, Larry, I think it's a gamble worth taking for Kirby to do this. And when I say gamble, because you're putting a guy on the field who's never been on the field, certainly not at this level. And hey, let's be honest, man. None of Nick's assistants have been able to beat him on the field. So if you go get one of his top coaches, then at least the optics of it are you're going and taking something away from him. I think it'd be a bigger lick for Kirby if he got him as his head strength coach.
Right.
If he came in and took him away and brought him in as Georgia's head strength coach, I think that would be a bigger lick. But I think it's still something that, it's an outside the box, unconventional hire for Kirby. And, the guy that he just took, Cochran, away from Nick Saban, has been pretty good at that over the years. Probably not given as much credit for thinking outside the box as he does. But, we're talking about the guy who hired Lane Kiffin. He came in and really, in a lot of ways, revolutionized their offense. Hey, he hired Scott Cochran, who was an assistant strength coach in the NBA when he got the job in 2007, but saw enough in him and felt like he was a guy that, could really help them do what he wanted to do there at Alabama. So, I give Kirby credit for doing that. With Alabama being Alabama and their resources and facilities, they're getting ready to open up a brand new strength and science center there on campus. I don't have any question that they'll be able to go out and get who they want in that department, one of the best in the country.
I couldn't help but think back 7 years ago to 2013 when a man named Thad Turnipseed, who was a pretty crucial part of the Alabama machine in the area of facilities and getting things done for Nick, he takes a leap of faith, takes a massive pay cut, and buys into Dabo's vision that he needs to sort of spread his wings, and he's most certainly done that. But I guess I'm saying that back then it was a sort of a shock to hear of some, person in Saban's inner circle leaving for another place, let alone Clemson, which hadn't gotten to the level it is now and was only sort of dreaming of that. We've seen a ton of turnover since, and it's really not all that surprising to see Saban lose someone now. Sarkisian flirted with Colorado. It sounds like they were maybe lucky that he decided to stay in Tuscaloosa, so he might not be around for much longer. How much is all this churn on Saban's staff? I think he lost 6 this time a year ago, and of course that was only the most recent layer of it. How damaging has that been? Have they lost some of their fastball as a result of that, in your opinion?
Well, I think it would have been a lot more damaging to Nick that he lost Steve Sarkisian than losing right now, where we are right now, as opposed to losing Scott Cochran. To lose another OC, think of how many different OCs have come through there, Larry, in the last 8, 9, 10 years. I think Nick told me that it would have been the 8th or 9th different OC he would have had to have hired since he got there in 2007. That's
amazing.
Anybody is as good and as brilliant as Nick Saban has been. So I think that would have been an even tougher replacement for him to bring in somebody at this point, because you're going to have a new quarterback next year. Tua's gone, and to sort of have that type of transition again with a new quarterback would have really been difficult. So that was a priority for him to keep Sarkisian. So it was Colorado was his job if he wanted it, and he turned it down. Now Alabama's going to take care of it. You're going to see him go to. I mean, it's amazing now to think that these guys, assistants, coordinators, at the top of the line are making $2 million plus, and that's where Sarkisian will go. Yeah, Nick has hired a lot of good people, a lot of good coaches, a lot of coaches in demand. He's developed a lot of good coaches, and because of their success, people have come and gotten them. We heard when he lost Kirby, it was never going to be the same. When he lost Jeremy Pruitt, Jim McElwain, Lane Kiffin, I mean, on and on and on. He's lost really good coaches. A lot of those guys, have gone on to be head coaches or have gotten promotions or have gone to the NFL. Mike Loxley's now the head coach at Maryland. And it's never ideal. He'll tell you that. He gets frustrated the fact that he brings in guys and they learn his system and they have some success, and then they go on and they get bigger jobs. I mean, Nick's all for these guys getting, opportunities, but I don't think it's ideal for anybody. It would be for any business or any organization or any team to lose that many people. And he's always had those rocks on the defensive side of the ball, be it a Kirby, be it a Will Muschamp, a Kevin Steele, a Jeremy Pruitt. Through all those championships, you had those guys, and those guys have moved on. Certainly on the defensive side of the ball. And we mentioned offensive coordinators. Think about all the offensive coordinators he's had. So it's, I wouldn't say it's, let's be honest, Larry. Every time they don't win a national championship, every time Nick has the audacity not to win a national championship or to go 2 years in a row and not win one. I mean, can you imagine the audacity there at Tuscaloosa to go a couple years in a row and not win a national title? But when that happens and he loses a key guy on his staff, and the narrative immediately starts, well, it's over. The run's over, the dominance is over, the dynasty's over. As long as he keeps coaching, he's always going to be swimming in those waters. They're always going to be playing or competing for a national title. They're not necessarily going to win one every year. That doesn't happen. Get our buddy Dabo talking about that. I love to get him riled up about that he's at that point now where if he didn't win a national championship every year, then it's somehow an unsuccessful season. And I don't know that you can get him more riled up about anything than bringing up that topic. But that's sort of where Alabama's been now for a while. And I think Saban understands that. But, they continue to hire good coaches. I think he probably brought in too many young guys a few years ago when he had a lot of turnover. I think he's tried to correct that. If you look around his staff now, he's got more veterans sort of scattered in along his staff, and a lot of guys who've worked with him previously, like a Sal Sunseri, Steve Sarkisian, those kind of guys. And I think that sort of helped balance that staff.
Yeah, we've definitely seen this movie before in terms of people burying Alabama and saying the dynasty's over. But I'm curious, sort of in reference to you mentioned a few minutes ago, Saban revolutionizing offense and making major changes to adapt and be more modern on that side of the ball. And then also, years ago, getting smaller on defense, that doesn't have decided that had to use smaller DBs instead of the 245-pound safeties and things like that to be more adept at covering it in today's space game. In light of what happened in Santa Clara with Clemson putting up 44, what happened last year in Tuscaloosa when LSU put up, I guess it was 46, and then Auburn's offense, which really wasn't all that good, went up and down the field. I know two of those touchdowns were pick sixes, so that's not on Alabama's defense. But I'm wondering, do you think that, because we know that Saban can't go, a season, many more seasons giving up 40-plus points at the frequency he has over the last year or so. I'm wondering if you think that he views this, the presence of LSU finally going modern on offense, other offenses doing the same thing. And the fact is, to win a national championship, you got to score a ton of points. I'm wondering if you think this represents his latest and maybe greatest sort of existential crisis that he has to adapt to in terms of making his defense, getting his defense to the point where it somehow is fit to defend some of these high tech sort of supersonic offenses, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think he's been moving in that direction for a while, to be honest with you. The game's changed. He knows that. He gets that. It's, I think the Auburn game, you mentioned that they give up 20-some points without the 2 defensive touchdowns in that game. So LSU rolled it up on everybody, really except for Auburn. Auburn had one of the better defenses in the country last year, and they rolled it up. And even with that, talking about the way the game's evolved, if Tagovailoa is not hurt, I think Alabama probably beats LSU in Tuscaloosa. He's playing on one leg, certainly, and they almost did anyway. It was anybody's game, but if he's healthy in that game, I think they have a great chance to win that game. So they were still pretty close last year, but he understands the game has changed. What defines really good defense now, Larry, is certainly different than what defined really good defense in 2012 or 2011.
Mm-hmm.
You think about them having Terrence Cody there in the middle and nose guard back in, I guess when they won his first national championship was 2009, and then they won again in 11 and 12. So he was right there in that span. I mean, it's hard for him to play right now, that kind of player. And Saban has tried to go out and get guys, hybrid guys who can play. Everybody's looking for those guys. The Isaiah Simmons of the world, who can play every down, can cover, can rush the passer. Those players are in demand more than they've ever been because of the way offenses are playing, how fast everybody's playing, and the pace, and the way offenses are spreading people out. But no, they were not as good defensively, not even close to being as good defensively last year as they've been in the past. Part of it is they lost so many linebackers. I think they lost 3 of their best linebackers, and they had to play with a lot of young linebackers, and they really were exposed. Clemson exposed them the year before. Just absolutely, and Nick will tell you that. I think he said that himself. We got exposed. But he'll continue to adapt, I think. They'll continue to change. The game changes, and he knows they got to score points. You can't win every game 24-17 anymore, when they were doing that. And they've won their share of shootouts over the last, think it's, the game when they beat Clemson, in 15? Was that 45-40,
yeah.
Yeah, so they've been able to win their share of shootouts, and I think he'll continue to bring in players. And again, that's why I think keeping Sarkisian was so important this year on the offensive side of the ball. And he gets it. He's an old school guy and stubborn as the day is long, but he hasn't been stubborn when it comes to changing and evolving and adapting and trying to find new ways to do things and bringing in coaches that maybe you didn't see him bringing in, like Kiffin or Sarkisian. Even his defensive coordinator now, Pete Golden, people didn't know who he was before Nick brought him in. So it's it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But I have a hard time believing that Alabama's not going to be right in the middle of the national championship discussion again this year. And do they get to the playoff? Do they win the championship? Do they play for a championship? There's so much that goes into that. You look at Clemson last year. Clemson had a really good football team, but the year before they lost their entire defensive line to the NFL. It's hard. It's hard to recover from that. It really is. And it's hard when you lose a player like a Tagovailoa. It's hard when you lose difference makers on defense, guys that can make plays in space. Alabama's had a ton of those, but I don't think they had as many of them last year. We'll see how that changes this year.
On the topic of adapting and modernizing, we saw Kirby bring in Todd Monken, saw him bring in Jamie Newman from Wake Forest. So there's the assumption that, okay, he's changing his ways, going less conventional and realizing that the way you win national championships is from throwing and catching and scoring a bunch of points. Though I have to point out, he hasn't really been all that forthcoming. He hasn't totally acknowledged that. He's kind of playing coy there. I'm wondering, what do you think about that development, and how influential do you think LSU was last year in the way that it did what it did in bringing in Joe Brady and and modernizing its offense after years and years and years of ground and pound.
Well, I mean, they showed, certainly at Ogeron, let's give that credit. You showed that, he's not unwilling to adapt and to change things up. And, you still got to be able to play defense, though, I think, to win at the highest level. And it's not, you're not going to win, 21-17, as I said, every game. But the ability to be able to score big in those games when you play, 3 to 4 to 5 of your best teams every year during the season. That includes your conference championship games and playoffs. You got to be able to do that. And that's where, to me, where it's changed the most, Larry, is that in the past, if you were so dominant on defense, it didn't matter. You were just going to be able, to win. Now, even you can still be dominant and have great players, be pretty healthy. But there's 3 to, depending on what conference you play in and who you match up with. Let's be honest, who you match up with in the playoffs. Because if you all of a sudden get an Oklahoma with a Kyler Murray, that's probably different than, say, getting a Notre Dame or Michigan State or whomever. I mean, you get my point on that. But you better be equipped in 3 to 5 games every year to score 40+ if you're going to win it all.
Happy to have Founders Federal Credit Union on board as a sponsor with us. If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Matt Gross is a proud Clemson alum and the vice president for the Clemson market for Founders Federal Credit Union. Matt's office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. You make a great point, sort of reminding of the importance of defense, even in this era. I mean, and combined with mentioning Oklahoma, I mean, they can score with anybody, but they can't stop anybody. Well, they don't have the defensive personnel, and that's reflected in the recruiting classes, the 5 stars that do not go to Oklahoma, the defensive linemen, Oklahoma in particular, and the Big 12 in general, and then in the draft, it seems like they are well behind in that respect.
And remember, hey, taking nothing away from Trevor Lawrence, he was magnificent in the national championship game 2 years ago, okay? And they had great players around him. But I think we all sort of have short memories of just how dominant that Clemson defense was, especially up front in those games against Notre Dame and Alabama. I mean, they completely took those teams, and in some cases on the back end, they took those teams completely out of the game defensively. And you still got to have that. You still got to be able to do that. You just, you're not going to win every game. Just like I said, you're not going to win 24-17. You ain't going to win 48-45 every game either, especially playing at the highest level. And there's probably more of a mix now required if you're going to win a championship, but you still better be able to play defense. You better be able to get to the passer. And you better not be giving up 200 yards on the ground. That's the other thing. Alabama, their run defense last year was about as porous as I've seen in a long time. They didn't tackle as well. And I think sometimes some of that is when you change on offense and you go to more of that widespread pace, spread it out, you got to practice that way. Okay, and sometimes you lose a little bit of that toughness, that edge of being able to stop the run. I think every coach I've talked to across the country has talked about that. That sometimes you lose that a little bit, but I still think there's a couple constants is being able to get to the passer and not letting teams dictate to you that they're going to run the football. Because if you're bad at either one of those, I don't care how many points you score, you're going to have a hard time winning championships.
Yeah, the yards after contact Alabama allowed last year had to have been more in that season than maybe in the previous 5 years combined. It was startling just because you're so used to Alabama's tackling being far better than anybody else's, them just knocking people's heads off figuratively. But there were a lot of running backs running through contact against Alabama last year. And another point, Alabama scores so quickly that the defense is back on the field very quickly. That's another thing that Saban, I think, groused about quite a bit last season.
I can't imagine Nick grousing about anything. That's not his character.
So what?
No,
Go ahead.
He was frustrated last year by a couple things. I know losing Dylan Moses, their middle linebacker, was a huge loss for them before the season.
Mm-hmm.
That was a killer. He was their guy. They rocked there in the middle of that defense, and then they lost 2 other linebackers on top of that, and just were playing with young linebackers, and you saw that in the way they played defensively. They just weren't the same. Now those guys will be a lot better this year. And Moses is supposed to be back. Well, he is going to be back. We'll see health-wise where he is. So that should help those young guys that had to play last year. I think they will be much better at stopping the run and tackling than they were a year ago. But when you play, especially the way the game's played now and what you ask linebackers to do, Larry, when you're playing with first-year guys and guys who haven't played much, you're always going to be exploited to some degree.
So ordinarily, as in this time last year, the thought of a transfer quarterback coming in and guiding a team to championship contention was a little bit offbeat, whereas now we're sitting here, Justin Fields guided Ohio State to within a whisker of the national championship game. Joe Burrow had a masterpiece of a season. I'm wondering, with Jamie Newman at Georgia, is Newman good enough, and is Georgia's overall talent good enough for them to finally break through and deliver the championship that the fans have been clamoring for since 1980?
Well, I tell you what, the coaches that coach Newman, the previous regime, really think he's a really good player. A lot of talent. A guy that I think has a chance to be a really good player. And, but so much of it is the guys around him too. Georgia's losing a couple big-time players up front offensively. I just never felt last year, Larry, that Fromm ever had a really good chemistry connection with his receiving core. Part of that was, he lost some of those guys, and they weren't very explosive. How many big explosive chunk plays did they make down the field in the pass game? Very few. I know that's one of the reasons. That's one of the areas I know for a fact that Kirby wants to get better. And I think that's, you bring in a guy like Monken and, the deep passing game, just not even the deep passing game, but just being able to make more big plays, catch out, run after the catch type plays. You just, you can't go 10, 11 plays, 75 yards over and over again. It's just, that's harder and harder to do. They're swimming in those waters, and they're recruiting in those waters. And I understand, and Kirby understands that everybody wants a national championship. We forget that he did win an SEC title in 2017, the first one for Georgia in a long time, and came within a whisker of winning the national title that year against Alabama. So, and then Jalen Hurts comes in a couple years ago and saves Alabama's bacon against Georgia in the SEC championship game. They would have won another one. So they're right there. And then I think that they're going to be awfully salty on defense this year. I think they'll be as good defensively as anybody out there. Now, can they be good enough and explosive enough offensively to win those? I don't know how many 3, 4, 5 games we were talking about earlier where they have to score 40 points, 38, 40, 45 points. We're going to find out. But I think Kirby's done for the most part, I think, what Georgia brought in to do. The guy before him, Mark Richt, averaged 10.5 wins a year, but, hadn't been winning championships. Kirby's got him in the championship game. He's won the SEC championship. He's had him in the national championship game. My cliche always is, Larry, is if you're going to catch that great white shark, you better be swimming in the right waters. And I think he is recruiting and swimming and playing in the right waters right now.
What do you make of the situation in Columbia? Not a fun off season with all sorts of speculation about Muschamp's buyout, and not from just fans, but from trustees and even the president. And he brings in Mike Bobo, and it appears from everything that has been said that they're going conventional. I mean, Bobo's first press conference says they're going to make use of the tight ends and fullbacks, and then a couple of days ago, Muschamp said they're going to be more under center, which I can't really make sense of why that's the best idea given their talent. What do you make of all that?
Well, I mean, I'll say this. Bobo and Will know their talent a lot better than I do. I know a lot of coaches around the country got a lot of respect for Mike as an offensive coordinator, as a guy that knows offense. He certainly knows that league, having coached in the SEC a long time. But it's a huge year for South Carolina, period, not just Muschamp, to get back to where they're relevant. They have that flash of relevance last year where they went at Georgia. But to be consistent, and not lose the games. I mean, he's lost the game. He's had some decent wins, but they've lost some games that you just can't lose. To teams you need, if you're going to get on that trajectory where you're getting better every year and you're making progress, you can't lose to some of the teams they've lost to the last few years. I think he's recruited well. I like their recruiting operation. They seem to bring, to be bringing in some good football players, but this will be a telltale year for them. They need to, everybody wants a number. We've got to win this many games or that many games. I mean, I don't know if there's a number, and they certainly need to have a winning season and be a team in November that, looks like they're a whole lot better than they were in September. Now, part of it is they've been beaten down some by injuries. A lot of that comes from recruiting and maybe a little bit better, developing a little bit better, creating more depth. But I do think had Will not had the big buyout, he could have been in some big trouble this past year. They might have made a move, and you're always going to have that chunk of the fan base. I mean, you're in that state. You've been in that state your whole life, and I grew up there. That every 3 or 4 years, if it's not going well, they're ready to make a move. And that hadn't worked real well for South Carolina. if we've noticed that plan hasn't worked well. And what happened, let's be honest, Steve Spurrier comes in there and takes them to heights that they've never ever sniffed, not even come close to sniffing. They owned Clemson there during that stretch. They were beating Florida. They were beating Tennessee. They were beating Georgia. They got to the SEC championship game. Now, the way he left was, I think he will forever regret that. The way he left and just, sort of flamed out there. But he took them to those heights where if you're a South Carolina fan, you say, no, wait a minute. We've tasted that. We know we can be a top 10 program, because they were a top 10 program for 3 straight years? They finished in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible. And some people say, well, the time was right. Everybody else in the SEC wasn't as good. Well, I think when you hear that argument for any team, doesn't the fact that maybe the team that's doing that, maybe they're having a little bit of an impact on those other teams. Maybe those are the reason, the way they're recruiting, because South Carolina was able to recruit in that state. They got the plums in that state. And growing up in that state, I remember a time when those guys went to Florida State, they went to Georgia, they went to Tennessee, they went to North Carolina, everywhere but South Carolina, and they got those guys, the Clowneys and the Lattimores and Stephon Gilmores. It still gets back to beating the teams on the recruiting trail that you got to beat on the field. And that includes Clemson, because Dabo's built just a monster there. And not only there in the state of South Carolina, but Dabo's been able to go into Georgia and Florida. And that's why he's made it, Dabo's made it not only on South Carolina, but he's made it hard on Tennessee, on Georgia, on everybody that had typically come in. Florida State had come in and cherry-picked, some of the great players in that region, not just in that state, but in that footprint. But no, it's a big year, no question, for Will, and they need to. I have a hard time believing that if this coming season is comparable to this past season, that he'll survive as head coach, and not just him, but any coach would. To have 2 back-to-back seasons like that, and I think then you ask, the question becomes, well, what happens to his boss, Ray Tanner? Would he be allowed, if they do have to make a change, to hire the new coach? I know Will. I've known Will a long time. He is a guy that he doesn't give in easily, and he's a guy that sort of is pretty good what's the old saying? In any given Sunday, the 6 inches in front of your face, and focusing and controlling what he can control. I think you saw that a little bit this year with some of the guys they brought in recruiting. I think they'll be a better football team next year, but sometimes it's the things that you can't control, injuries and timing and schedule. But I think more than anything else, what he's got to do is he's got to beat the teams that they should beat. Because if he just does that last year, you think about it. Last year they won at Georgia. Then we're looking at last year's season, a whole new complexion of what last year would have looked like.
Last question. Assuming you have a way too early top 25 for 2020, where's Clemson on it?
Mark Slabaugh is your expert.
Oh, that's right. I got the wrong guy.
I think he probably gets more emails and direct messages and on that than he does anything else. It's amazing how many fans look at those type polls. I don't care who does them. And you know what? I don't care who does them. They're never really close to being right, because we all look at, all of us, media fans, we're all guilty of looking at, this team finished strong. They got a pretty good class for coming in. We'll keep, it never works out the way we think. To me, Clemson is still right there in the top 5. I can't imagine them being somewhere, whether you want to put them number 1 or number 3 or 4. It's the same. It's the usual suspects, Larry. There's a stat. In fact, I was going to look this up before I came on with you. We've had how many playoffs have we had now? We've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 playoffs, right? So that's 24 spots. 24 spots in those 6 playoffs. I want to put you on the spot here. Of those 24 spots, 4 teams have occupied 16 of those spots. Ooh. Who are those 4 teams?
Clemson.
Who are those 4 teams?
Clemson, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Ohio State's been 3 times.
Bingo.
Ohio State, yeah.
Bingo. Again, the usual suspects, right?
Right.
So I don't think that's going to change a whole lot. Do you?
No.
No, Oklahoma. No. We'll see Oklahoma. They're going to have a new quarterback, but I think history suggests under Lincoln Riley that they're going to be pretty good at that position. But so think about that: 24 spots in the 6 playoffs, and 16 of those spots have been occupied by 4 teams, 4 schools. And I know when we went from the BCS to the playoff that, it's going to be better. It's going to be more representative. No, it's not. It's still the haves. It's still the teams that get the best players, that got the best coaches, got the most resources, and schools that have gotten it right with the coach. I mean, obviously Clemson got it right with Dabo. Oklahoma got it right with Lincoln Riley. Alabama got it right with Nick Saban. Ryan Day's only been there full time for a year, but I had a chance to spend some time in the last preseason. He's awfully impressive. And they've got a recruiting machine going, and Georgia that's the team that I think could move into that tier. They're poised to move into that tier. But having 2 from the SEC, they did obviously in 2017, but getting 2 in the playoff from the SEC is or really from any conference is always going to be a challenge. The funny thing is, when are we going to see the Pac-12 sort of join the party? Are they going to join the party?
Well,
anytime soon?
And to be fair, a year ago at this time, you and I were actually, and many other people, the ironclad assumption we had was, it's Clemson and Alabama from here on out, like for the foreseeable future. And so, in fairness, nobody envisioned LSU joining the party.
No.
And they not only did they join the party, they crashed the party. And so, I guess what I'm saying is, yes, it's always going to be the people with the most resources and the big dogs and all that. That's no surprise. But my contention is, as long as we have, some different folks joining that party, like if Georgia did it, this year, then you could argue, I mean, there is more diversity, I guess, than maybe we want to, than sometimes we want to say in hindsight, right? Because a year ago, nobody thought Ohio State, I mean, they were supposedly in shambles, and nobody thought Justin Fields was gonna take them, was gonna be that good that quickly. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so
I can promise you Ryan Day did. I can tell you what he told me when I was up there in August. He said his skill set is as good or as close as I've seen to anybody in college football since Cam Newton.
Wow.
He told me that last August. So I think he knew they had a great football player. But you look at the last last 5 championship games, either Clemson or Alabama have been in all 5.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there are some new faces creeping in, but I have a hard time seeing a playoff this year that doesn't include at least one of those 2 schools, and maybe both of them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, the 3 big states, California, Texas, Florida. That's the major underachievement on the field. Major has resulted in major recruiting defections. We're talking Southern Cal, UCLA, Texas A&M, Miami, Florida State. Florida, I know Florida is progressing under Dan Mullen in an impressive way, but still they have not locked up that state by any stretch. The answer is the sort of more traditional powers from those states getting out of their own way, isn't it? And that applies to the ACC as well, because of, you have Florida State and Miami that have been massive underachievers.
Yeah. Well, until Florida State, Miami become Florida State, Miami again, it's going to be a cakewalk for Clemson.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. There's just nobody that can challenge them. The way Dabo's got it going, the way he recruits, the way he develops players, the culture of that program and the competitive environment that they've created on the practice field there. I mean, I've been there to see it. There's nobody in that league, unless Mike Norvell or Diaz at Miami, Norvell at FSU, Diaz at Miami, can get those programs back to what they've been in the past. Clemson's they're going to sail through. But, you mentioned LSU joining the party, crashing the party. There's all sorts of gauges we can use about who's had the best players, or who's recruited or developed the best players. I always like to we can look at the draft. Larry, I always like to look at the combine invitees, because those are players that people who know a whole lot more about it than me and you do, and study players and evaluate players at the professional level, think are legitimately draftable players. They're invited to that thing. The only school, if you go over the last 3 combines, the only school that had more invitees to the combine the last 3 years in Alabama, Alabama was number 1 with 35. Number 2 was LSU with 32. So when you look at that, I mean, why were they, the fact that they were in the playoff, they had a season for the ages and maybe some transition where they had stepped in and all that. But, God, they've had great players over the last 3 or 4 years.
Just not the right offense.
Right, exactly. And it all fits together. It all has to fit together if you're going to make it happen.
Chris Lowe, man, it is fun, even here in late February, talking college football. Never too early, even though we don't have to talk about the way too early top 25. We'll leave that to Mark Slayball. Appreciate you joining us, man. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, a lot of fun. I appreciate you asking me.
All right, that'll do it. Thanks to our 2 guests, Chris Lowe, Joey Knight. Thanks to our 7 sponsors, including title sponsor Parham Smith and Arts and Hull Law Firm in downtown Greenville. And thanks mostly to all of you for listening. Everybody have a great rest of the week and weekend. Cheers.